I hope you wonder what these are. Hi all. I wanted to talk a little bit today about indicators and what's a good indicator, and because I get a lot of questions about indicators all the time on what kind of indicators work, what kind of indicators don't work, um, what's the best choice of indicators, and I've got a few examples of indicators and sort of my journey through indicators, some of which I have here and some of which I don't have here because I stopped using them. So basically an indicator in trout fishing, an indicator is a bobber. Okay, let's just be honest about it. That costs maybe 3 times as much as a bobber, maybe 10 times as much as a bobber, and I'll explain that in a minute. So oftentimes when you're nymphing, you have some kind of subsurface fly, and you want it to just basically bounce off the bottom of the stream, or just follow the stream, maybe a couple inches above the bottom. Probably 90% of what a trout eats is subsurface like that. So you want something that has basically 2 functions. One is it keeps that nymph at that level, and kind of keeps it off the bottom and at that level, and then as soon as a fish strikes, you can see it. So you don't want that thing floating on top to be too big, because then the fish will hit it and you won't notice it at all. So it has to be just the right weight for that to happen. The newer thing of Euro nymphing, or it used to be called Czech nymphing, is basically instead of a bobber, you're just keeping your rod just right above, you're keeping a tight line from the end of your rod to the nymph, so that you actually feel and see the fish take it. Okay, and then you can flip up real quickly. The problem with a bobber is that where there's the bobber, there's kind of a line between it, and it's not a direct connection to your rod, so you may miss hits. Many of you, if you have done a lot of this kind of indicator fishing, if you've gone with a guide, particularly out west, they rig you up, you toss the line out, and then you float along with the bobber and basically stare at a bobber for 5 hours and watch to see if it twitches. And when it twitches, the guide hollers out, catch it, or, pull, grab, set. Okay, so that's kind of, I'll give you an indication of what happens on those kinds of trips. They're lots of fun. Don't let me discourage you from taking one of those. But that's basically one of the main really uses of bobber fishing now, or indicator fishing. So let's talk about some different kinds of indicators. Early on, when I first started fishing, we used a lot of these little yarn indicators, and we'd take fly floatant, put a little bit of it on there. Fly floatant, the main brand back then was Gink, so we always say just ginked it up real well. Put this on your line, and then this was your bobber, basically. And they worked really well because they, as soon as a fish touches it, it goes underwater. So that was a primary one that we used. Another kind was when foam started to appear, we started using these foam ones that would basically work the same way. Then came things like antimobobbers and stuff, or not antimobobbers, thingamabobbers, and those types. And basically those where this is not a thingamabobber, but it's a fake, basically a fake thingamabobber. But it's, let me see if I can do that. No, okay, it's got to be back here. It's basically got a little loop on it. And what you would do is you could have your fly at the end of this. You take your fly line, you stick it through that loop. Stick it through that loop up at the top. See, I've looped my line. See how I've looped it? And it's through that little loop. And then you bring it, pull the bobber through it, and then basically this would float on the surface, and this, you know, it would be a ball or something, and then your nymph would be down here at the end. Okay? Sorry about the way this thing is focusing today. I don't know exactly what I did wrong. So that would be the basic thingamabobber sort of connector to your fly line. Another very, very typical kind of bobber are these, there's foam with a slit down the center and some kind of like rubber device. Some of them have like toothpicks, but basically the same thing happens here. You drop this through that line, kind of bring this through here. See, so you're just kind of pulling against where it slid through. And then if you take the rubber and you kind of stretch it, it'll make the rubber thin, and the rubber and the fly line goes behind it. See, and it loosens a little bit, but not too bad. And sometimes you can, you know, loop it around one more if you're really nervous, and then your nymph sits down here at the bottom. It's just another way of floating on the surface. Again, quite small, so, and usually a nice bright color. There was one year, a bunch of us were fishing. We bought a packet of what are called thingamabobbers, which are these round things, and they came in different colors. There was a yellow one and an orange one and a white one. And so we split them up to try them. I got the white one, which I could never see in the foam of the water. So, you know, you got these like bright yellow or orange colors work really well. There's some other examples too. There's something that I make. And I call it the antimabobber, and I have a video on how to make these, but basically it's a foam ant or a foam something, I don't know, whatever that is. And instead of just a float, because oftentimes you'll see the fish will come out and actually attack your float. So I thought one day as I was fishing and the fish were coming up to the surface attacking my float, I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to make a float that works the same way as an antimabobber. So there's a loop on the end of that. Okay, there we go. And again, you just do it the same way. You stick this through the loop, you loop it around your fly, let that come through, and boom. It's basically a float and a fly at the same time, and your nymph hangs from the bottom. So if the fish comes up for your bobber, you know, they don't care about your nymph, but comes up for your bobber, at least you got a chance in hooking them that way. Okay, just something I do. The most recent sort of bobber is these kind with the little screw tops. And again, there's the brand name ones, and then there's the sort of Temu version ones, and or, you know, whatever, the knockoff version ones. I call everything that's a knockoff Temu. So, you know, but basically it's got a little screw top on it, and you throw it. There's a little split there. Then you tighten this down on it. And that's my biggest concern about these, is that anything that comes in more than one part to me is asking for trouble. So then you screw it down. Come on. There you go. And basically it's screwed on there, okay? And then you can slide it up and down if you need to, and then tighten it to wherever you need it to be, okay? They're fairly simple. A lot of guys just swear by these things, okay? Um, Now, these are about like $3-4 a piece. Antima bobbers don't cost anything. I think I get these for these are almost like $1 a piece. Okay, a little over $1 a piece. So these various types of bobbers are $2-3 a piece. I happen to be at our version of Walmart here in Michigan, Meyer. It's another one of those things, and I bought 3 of these little bobbers for 32 cents, and I'll do an unpacking. And so these are basically 10 cents a piece, and basically they work. They've got like actually a cool little spring system here, and you can just hook it on there, and there it is. That's a 10-cent one version of it, and it holds really, really well, and it's about the same buoyancy as these other ones. So there's a whole range of them. There used to be, I don't see them much anymore. There used to be these little stick-on ones, or they were like a little disc. Then you peeled the paper off and threw that in the water, which is not a good thing. And then you'd stick them on your line, and they were fine, except that they would leave a big gooey mess on your line. So you can pretty much do anything to make a little indicator. It's not. This is again, fly fishing is not rocket science. So that's sort of just my little take on all these different types of indicators, and I hope you learned something. And that's all I have to say about it. Thank you. Keep watching.